Hello, fellow hunters. Today we talk about Deviants.
Shut your dog!
Oh yes, Deviants are devilishly delicious, but are we like to see them in world? Well, despite the fact that they were only in the games Cross Generations Ultimate that were developed alongside world, I'd say so, because they have garnered, rightfully so, huge popularity. And for good reason. They allow you to take an existing monster, go absolutely fucking mental with it, and create this extreme, ridiculous, memorable, awesome version that still has the undercurrents of the monster you know and love. And because they are essentially unique, though occasionally you do get multiple of the same deviants, you can push the boat out a lot further than you can with a subspecies. So, a deviant comes about when a member of a species, through an extremely rare, random event, like surviving a hunter encounter, living long enough, a random mutation, environmental pressure, struck by fucking lightning! Lightning bolt! And due to that, changes, grows, develops, gains new powers, abilities, strength, speed, intelligence, and altogether turns into a paragon of its species, essentially becoming a whole new beast. It's a work of art that'll make you cough. Such as, a good example, Bloodbath Diablos, formerly known as the Massacre Demon. This is quite, well, I mean, he literally wears the blood of his enemies. All of his blue coloring is dried on blood. He survived a hunter encounter when he was young, but lost his horn and it grew back giant, deformed, and wonky. And now his hatred for hunters is so strong it manifests itself as literal burning rage that he uses to instantly evaporate secretions out of his skin to create huge balls of boiling steam that explode outwards from him, knocking and burning everything in his path away. Yeah, that's really the abridged version. This is a public service announcement. Don't cut off a young Diablos' fucking horns. Thank you. So, what kinds of these creatures could we see in world? Let's start then with Kulu-Ya-Ku. And as much as I love you, Kulu, you're not in for a good time.
Say what?
Introducing Sickened Kulu-Ya-Ku. Let me tell you a story. There once was a Kulu-Ya-Ku who was too egg-hungry for his own good. Delving deep into a cave system he found off the waste of the jungle, searching for delicious eggy goodness, well, he got a little bit lost. But this is no joke. Emerging into a new location, stinking of death, the tunnel that led him there, with the earth shifting, collapses behind, trapping him in this strange new location. But Kulu-Ya-Ku is a clever sort, able to use rock tools almost with his boulder defense technique, and he's not to be discouraged, slinking around the veil through a modicum of luck, a modicum of skill, and 100% concentrated power of will. He avoided Odogorons, avoided Gyros packs, and eventually started to get hungry and turned to doing what he does best, sneaking out of little rotting alcoves he hides in at night, hunting the nests of the local denizens. Them, not used to such a thief, have no real defense against Kulu's guile, and he steals egg after egg after egg, finding the shell hard and thick, unlike the eggs he's used to, his beak and claws growing longer, sharper, with a razor serration to break through into the gooey goodness underneath. His speed increased as he fears danger round every corner, his mind sharper, aware of what might be lurking in the shadows as he darts out to claim his prize. Eventually, though, he grows strong, larger, bigger, on all the eggs he has access to, alone with no competition on the nests. But this was not to be a happy ending for Kulu-Ya-Ku. You see, the eggs he was lapping up acting essentially as effluvium soup, and Kulu-Ya-Ku, a strange creature to these lands, has none of the resistance the other members have built up. The effluvium then, looking at him as no different from any rotting corpse they break down, begin to do so from the inside. Once his stomach is bereft of food, well, it starts working on Kulu himself. He learnt to deal with this initially as huge hunger pains from inside, consuming more and more, being bolder and bolder in his attempts to raid Ness, ending up in fights with Gyros and even an Odogaron, costing him his right eye, now scarred over with mangled tissue, his remaining eye glowing with pain in the dark. But he only added to his problem, introducing more and more effluvium to his body, his skin darkening and withering. Despite his larger size, his body almost skeletal in its thinness, looking like a wicked shadow of the Kulu that we know. He begins to get more desperate as the pain inside is excruciating, trying for the first time a diet of meat on a nearby Gyros corpse. And that seemed to work for a while, but even then, it was not enough. And he would go after the great Gyros, noting how its fangs produce such paralyzing venom. He would, when possible, rip it out of the dead Gyros' skull and let it drip upon his claws, giving him the edge that he needed to defend against Odogarons. He, of course, has tried all he can to stem the rotting inside, except one thing: hunters. So beware the dark corners of the Vale, for there is a Kulu-Ya-Ku that's cooler than you. Sorry, I couldn't resist at the end there. But yeah, essentially a desperate, sad, in pain Kulu-Ya-Ku that has grown frail yet strong with his caustic fight with the effluvium, picking up not rocks but balls of rotting flesh and bone that don't deflect attacks, but attacks that connect with the ball, explode it into a cloud of effluvium, debuffing you. He has a chance to paralyze his eyes you, and he is faster, more vicious, savage, jumping around the place, clawing you. You could even give him a little bit of bleed if you wanted to, a little bit larger, and he looks essentially, well, like a shadow of his former self. Imagine a valified almost Kulu. I think that would be really, really cool. I'm not going to do this kind of story time for all of them, but I thought that would be a neat way of doing his, because I do love Kulu. Let me know if you like that way of doing it. And look, I know it's easy to be like, well, the eggs were thick and difficult, so he grew better claws. But that's essentially how all the deviants are justified. They're not the most sensical things. I've tried my best here. You know, I like making it quite possible and accurate, but that's just how they are. So go with it. They're unique monsters, so it's fine, right? Let me know what you thought of that one. So for now then, moving on, we're staying in the Vale and going to my main man, Odogaron. I can't help it. Look, I love this monster, I really do, and there is too much of an obvious, incredible one right there just waiting to happen. So, here, let me introduce you to Burning Odogaron. You see, in the back of his nest is the Dalamadur rocks. Dalamadur, the up to adult projection size from the skeleton in the Vale, miles long, ancient elder dragon that can disintegrate mountains. It can rain blue fire meteors from the sky. Well, it's one of these meteors that is here smouldering away in the Vale for God knows how long. And Odogaron, being a curious and hungry sort, well, he'd find it one day and, like a lot of animals, see what something is with a quick taste test. And that's the mistake that he made. He's now got a chunk of this blue fire burning Dalamadur meteorite in his stomach. And his stomach is not equipped to digest that, so it sits there. The blue fire burning round his veins. He feels in agony, making that whimpering noise. And I promise you the rest of these aren't as dark as these two. I just realized it's like I'm just let's make pain monsters. No, it's burning round his body. He's in agony. And obviously, Odogaron in desperate agony is gonna be wildly vicious, so he would have much crazier psychotic attacks, but less precision. He'd almost be flailing around the place with deadly force. However, because this is in his stomach, whenever he eats anything to try and quell this pain, well, the blue fire just burns it away, so he's constantly in this starving yet fed state because the rock itself is also triggering his, well, I've eaten, this is fine state, so he's in this weird mix of permanently being in his Super Odogaron in rage, because his body is having this mental breakdown of, we're starving, but we're full, and it's just triggered him to perpetually go into this adrenaline injection overdrive, burning through the veil, desperate, sporadic, aggressive, and just completely unpredictable as he tries his best to tear through everything. Now, this Odogaron's lifeline is short here. He will die not long after consuming this, the fire eventually snuffing out his own life force, but during that time, he is a threat, going on a rampage like none have ever seen, and needing a hunter to put him down. Eventually, through combat, he goes into his enrage upon enrage, his default state being the Super Odo. He then, the red veins turning blue and starting to almost bleed and leak the blue fire, his body almost shrouded in it, and now his attacks, on top of being able to cause bleed, can cause burning simultaneously. Bleed needing you to stand still and burning needing you to roll. You have to make quite the decision on which one needs to get rid of first, while this in-pain Odogaron is flailing around the place on fire, trying desperately to kill you for just anything to consume to end this agony. Can you imagine that? Like, how awesome would it? Wreathed in blue fire, the burning effect on the hunter also blue. He's just absolutely going mental with speed, aggression, the like you've never seen. Maybe even slightly smaller than normal, going the opposite direction for once. Really stress speed over a just raw power increase outside of new fiery debuffs. And the thing is, the energy from the Elder's attack could very well be pumping inside of his very veins, strengthening him in all the usual conventions, giving him the ability to move at almost unreasonable speeds for one new killer attack where he tries to, let's say, completely expunge the fire and ends up just breathing it completely out, rushing through it, coating himself in a cloak of flame and diving at you like a meteor that the attack originally was off the wall. How freaking badass would that be? I see his armor being a blue charred version, maybe even still smoldering of his original, complete with all the new abilities and differences Deviant armor does have. Next up, Great Jag Race. Hopefully we can buff him enough to take on Great Jaggy, but we'll see. That's a difficult ask. Either way, I love this guy. I do. I don't care that he's essentially a free kill. He's a floppy, eaty, chompy lizard, and I adore lizards. And I love Jag Race. I really do. He's just caring for his little jaglings, giving them some delicious regurgitated meat. And trying his best, but his best ain't great. He dies a lot, hunted by hunters, other predators, disease, general frailty compared to most other monsters. I think it's fair to say Great Jag Race don't have the greatest lifespans. However, a lot of reptiles essentially don't stop growing. Their growth rate slows down exponentially as they get bigger and bigger and older, but they don't stop growing. And a lot of reptiles are exceptionally long-lived. Just look at the 100-year-plus tortoises. So, it wouldn't be unusual to give both these traits of Jag Race and turn them up to 11 Monster Hunter proportions. So let's say we have a Jag Race that had a terrifying close encounter with an Anjanath. It completely shook him to his core. He abandoned his little Jaglings and found himself a deep dark cave off the forest to which he called home, only leaving it when the endemic life, the scale bats, the crabs, the little morsels were no longer enough to satiate his immense hunger, and even then only leaving at night, converting to a nocturnal lifestyle, only staying in the moonlit forest long enough to grab a sleeping Aptonoth and return, eventually taking more and more as his size grew. You see, this cowardly lifestyle when Anjanaths are all asleep let him survive to old age, becoming the ancient Jag Race, or the Great Pale One, because this lifestyle means that he no longer sees the sun. His time in the cave bleaching his skin of pigment, turning a ghostly pale white with black highlights on his hair and occasionally splattered throughout his body and tail. The only slight bit of colour surrounding his eyes, his sad, scared eyes. He grows and grows and grows, ending up 3 times the size of a normal Jag Race, and starts to get a little bit of confidence back. One day bumps in to the Anjanath that so scarred him years ago, now matching it in sheer bulk. Well, the fight that went down that day.
This is the ultimate showdown, ultimate destiny, and only one will survive. I wonder who it will be.
It's Jag Race, obviously, or this wouldn't work. But old habits break hard, and he started being more bold at night, but still at night. And this reptile, no longer warming his blood under the sun, has gotten used to cold. It has become a part of him, suffering many a freezing nights in the depths of his new cave nest that have chilled him to his absolute core. I.e. then, we get ourselves a new frost monster. So imagine a triple size, more agile from his nightly quick trips to not die, more powerful, more coordinated, more focused and desperate to survive Jag Race that has this pale look and is absolutely freezing to the touch. Now, he's not going to start generating frost, but Jag Race, the great Jag Race we have, has stomach acid attacks. He spits it at you. It's not very often and not very effective, but I'd like to turn that up to 11. So his stomach acid is now deathly cold. So he has a range of new spewing attacks covering the battlefield, making it rain with the icy acid and sending it out in great gouts that if it hits you directly, you get the cold debuff, you take a load of damage as the acid melts away at you, and then it covers areas of the floor in frozen caustic stomach acid that if you stand on, it's slippy, you lose stamina faster, maybe you don't have as good footing, maybe you get the debuff, but it also slowly drains your health, slower than the acid in the veil, but in the similar manner. And I think that would be badass, right? So a lot more physically intimidating, a lot more epic of a fight, with this cool addition of a new frost monster, but via frozen stomach acid goo. Like, come on! Also, with this Jag Race being so big, imagine it actually being able to now swallow large monsters as part of the fight. Deviants are super powerful, so a cool moment like this where an Anjanath runs up and Jag Race just fucking swallows it like an Aptonoth. Hell, maybe the Anjanath struggles inside his stomach, eaten whole, opens his mouth and spews fire, and the Jag Race opens his mouth because, oh my god, fire, and then it comes out the Jag Race's mouth and he gains a flamethrower while Anjanath is in his belly. How brilliant would that be? Oh my god, I think it would be an awesome way to diversify frost monsters and an awesome way to buff what is essentially a joke of a creature, despite how much I love him. Next up then, we have ourselves a Basil Gaius one. Look, I can't not do it. He needs a savage, he needs a furious version to match Rajang and Joe. Now, technically, they're not Deviant versions, but that's essentially because they were created before Deviants were a thing. Look, Savage Joe is achieved when a Joe decides to go on a fit of cannibalism and eats too much Joe. That sounds like a Deviant creation to me, doesn't it? Okay, so this Basil Gaius then, I'm going to go for the actual birth defect route. I'm going to have it so that his explosive scale organs well, they're growing a little bit in the wrong places, covering way more than the underside of his head and his tail, spreading out to more of his body in weird little lines of scales that pepper him round. Maybe one of them going up past his eye, so he's only got one eye. I don't know why I keep blinding all the monsters, but, you know, he looks quite freakish, the scales growing in weird distorted places, but because of that he has way more of them. But he's not a huge fan of this, he's not in permanent pain or anything, but you know, he was laughed at as a baby Basil Gaius by all the other mean children. Ha ha, look at Billy All Scales, and well, that's not left him with the greatest of mood. But no, it does hurt him when he goes to use them. The organ's not functioning quite correctly, he gets a lot of misfires, and it's painful to use his explosions. And you know where we're gonna go with this, right? I'm not gonna go on a huge tirade with this one. He's permanently enraged. It would be bastard bollocks to fight this guy with any melee weapon because he's permanently dropping already ignited scales. But we could say they have a longer fuse because the organ's not working correctly, so it's slightly less ridiculous. But a permanently enraged Basil Gaius, we give him the usual boost to physical stats, and we add a new ultimate attack where he essentially, fed up with the pain of being in combat with his broken, mutated scale organs, he discharges all of them at once. Maybe flies into the air, and instead of doing a bombing run, though he'd still do those normally, he hovers and they all light up across his entire body, shining in the night, or I guess in the day if it's day when you fight him, but night's the cooler imagery, and then every direction, scales from all around his body, they just fling out and just carpet bomb the entire area, which everywhere, and then he lands exhausted and spent, completely out of scales, and you get a few little free hits in. Now obviously he would have an enrage beyond enrage, where he goes supernova heated, the red starts glowing almost hard to look at, and his scales don't even get a chance to drop in this mode. They grow in and just explode, so he becomes a walking chain explosion, so his physical attacks are coated in explosions. They're just rapidly growing and exploding as his body is in this furious overdrive powered by his twisted scale organs. Look, it's nothing crazy. That's essentially it. A Basil Gaius on hyper mode, but that's exactly what Savage Joe and Furious Rajang bring, and I think that would be really neat. Finally, then, we have Nergigante. How could I not do an Elder Dragon, and how could I choose any but the flagship himself? And look, truly, you might see this coming. I mean, you probably did because you have eyes and looked at the thumbnail, but it's too good to not happen. So we have a Nergigante, maybe a fairly young one, trying to make its way home. A lot of songs today. I'm sorry. And he's trying to make his way home. Wait, I just did that seconds ago. I've been talking about monsters for so long. I love it, but it's all of my... This Nergigante, they're not having a great time, losing fights to the other elders, not quite able to bring them down, hunters constantly hounding him, he constantly gets in fight, cycling through spikes after spikes after spikes, growing them more frequently than any Nergigante's body should be pushed to do. He keeps escaping, but it's taking a toll on him, and eventually his body is just like, I can't. And his regeneration stops working as efficiently as it should. He feels weak. He can barely get his spikes up anymore. It's a sad, sad time. They only grow in as little nubs, and without his spikes, he can't fight properly, and desperation sinks in. One final loss to hunters, he scampers away, desperately flying, and goes deeper and deeper into the recess, where he comes across the fallen corpse of Xeno'jiiva. Oh yes, desperate and hungry, he does what Nergigante does and chows down. The body, long dead, still has leftover overflowing energy from the huge cocoon absorption, and that energy courses through Nergigante as he consumes and becomes one with him. Surging into his every pore, he starts to glow with the blue, eerie, alien essence of Xenojiva. He would be Nergigante Jiva, or Xenogante, whichever one you prefer. So visually, parts of his body just have streaks of blue. His parts of his skin get a little bit translucent as it glows. And overall, the beauty of the glow mixed with his natural savagery, well, it makes for a striking image. But the main advantage of this, outside of, look, he's absorbing huge amounts of bioenergy, so he's stronger, faster, he's able to do moves that he simply wasn't able to do before, with increased acrobatic ability, doing like spin slams and huge feats of sweeping spike waves, and you know the jam, right? He'd have a huge mixed up moveset of physical dominance to really accentuate his natural potency, but the main difference comes with how it interacts with the spikes. So the energy then replenishes his ability to regrow and hypercharges it. His spikes grow in super quick, almost instantly, and they grow in already as black spikes. So he begins the fight, well, tough as nails. So instead of white spikes slowly turning black, and you gotta break them before that to avoid the super attack, now you would have black spikes that over the course of the combat slowly start to glow with Xenojiva's blue energy, and that's when they soften, and that's when you can break them. A flip reverse on the usual way of doing things. But just imagine, by the way, a Nergigante infused with that alien blue glow of Xeno. Maybe Nergi even develops a few of those flowy blue fleshy flaps that Xeno's got covering him. His wings maybe get a little bit more Xeno flowy. How badass would that look? Oh! So, his spikes glow in like that, and Nergigante's newfound overflow of bioenergy lets him really feel his body, control it in a way that he never thought possible, and he essentially can now eject individual spikes from his body, imagining holding his wing in front of his face and firing out just pew, 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 a few spikes with little blue traces of energy behind them like natural missiles in the direction of the hunter, giving him a bit more of a ranged presence and making him even more deadly. But his new ultimate attack would be where it's at. When he finishes every spike, when it's all glowing, he can enter his enraged state where the energy just bubbles up almost to too much, to overflowing. He starts to glow everywhere and he gets the usual enraged boost, but like Teostra, when it's going to run out is when he unleashes his big attack, and if you've not managed to destroy every patch of glowing spikes, well then you're in for it. That's the timer you have, the length of his enrage to break every section of spikes. If even one remains, because, you know, it's got to be brutal, it's an Elder Dragon Deviant, for God's sake, he is going to launch into the air, instantly regrow every spike in the glowing state, and then, essentially,
our arrows will blot out the sun.
Then we will hunt in the shade. Yeah, all of them loosed upwards from his body. It will start to rain death a few moments later, giving you a little bit of reaction time, but from the area immediately around Nergi, spreading outwards as the ground gets pin-missiled with glowing blue spikes. A safe spot would either be super far away, or flash him probably, or directly underneath him. After he's finished doing this, he'll crash down to the ground underneath him, exhausted from the effort, damaging and knocking away anyone there, but now he takes a little bit of a breather. Not crazy different to the Basil Gaius one, I admit, but thematically fucking badass. So you have a souped up Xeno-powered Nergigante causing havoc with energy spike missiles. Yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts on all of these guys, especially the Nergigante. What other moves would you give him as he's powered up by this? I love it. You might have noticed my favorite thing about Deviants is coming up with how they're made. I think they have some cool stories and beautiful ways of coming about that really give meaning to fighting them and, you know, really justify them being essentially a new monster with a new armor set, despite being heavily based on an existing one, of course. But, oh, I adored making this video. video. Please let me know if you liked it. It would mean the world if you shared it around. If you did, I wanted this to be the best it could be, so I hope you enjoyed my ideas, and I would love to get some discussion going. Hear yours, any critique, it's all good. You guys really are an awesome audience. My name has been Josh. I will see you soon. Subscribe for more. Goodbye.
Rage Gaming with the video float.
But that's all that's really relevant at the mo, but I'm still gonna leave this up so you patrons know that I love you even though the outro's no longer that kind of relevant. But the new one's being worked on and it's gonna be a truly badass song, and don't worry, I won't be doing any rapping on it. I'm gonna go now. This was shit.